Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday to you. It is the start of another good week, and I am glad that you're starting it with me in the Word of God. My name is Tim Harris. I'm pastor at Woodburn Baptist Church. It's 10 o'clock. That means it's time for 10 with Tim. I have been at this 10 with Tim now for some time. We started at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, for those of you who've been with me from then. Others of you have sort of jumped in the course of the last couple of years, and God bless you. I think that's fantastic. Welcome aboard. But let me just let you know, over the last weekend, last several days, I've gone back into this Facebook page and also my YouTube channel for 10 with Tim, just to organize things. I've cleaned some things up. So what you'll now find are what are called playlists. Both platforms use that word playlist. And essentially what I've done is taken all of the lessons from Galatians recently, put all those in one playlist. So what you can do now is just simply go back through and find the Bible book that you wish to study. If you missed one and want to go back, or if you want to recommend one of these studies to a friend, you can just find those playlists now on YouTube and also on Facebook. I just want to let you know that I've done that. A little bit of housekeeping on the Facebook page, and now also the YouTube page. So if you're interested, you can find those playlists there. Today we're in Ezra chapter 6. Verses 1 to 22, Ezra chapter 6. Now, I haven't mentioned this in the last few days, but I just want you to know, and you may not care, but I think it's interesting. You probably heard that in biblical studies, we often make much of the fact that the New Testament is written in Greek and the Old Testament is written in Hebrew. Those are typically called the biblical languages, Hebrew and Greek. What we usually don't mention, but I think is remarkable, is that what we're reading right now in the book of Ezra, from about chapter 4, verse 8 through chapter 6, where we are today, verse 18, those couple of chapters right there in the book of Ezra, these are written in Aramaic. Aramaic, not Hebrew, Aramaic. It's written in Aramaic, we suppose, because Ezra is dealing with so many of these documents that come from the Persian court, and Aramaic was the official language of the Persian court. So the Edict of Cyrus, these kinds of documents that keep getting imported into Ezra, these are original Aramaic documents, and so Ezra just imports them in the original Aramaic. But what's interesting is that in these couple of chapters, in between the Aramaic documents, he continues to write the narrative out in Aramaic. I don't know if he's just trying to show off the fact that he knows Aramaic, if that gives him some credibility in working with these Aramaic documents. I don't know. But it's just interesting that this portion of Ezra that we're reading is somewhat unique in the Old Testament because it's written in Aramaic. You don't have to care. You're reading it in English. Honestly, I am too. But I still think that's remarkable. I think that's interesting. Now, where we pick up in chapter 6, Ezra chapter 6, remember that on Friday, the people of Israel said, hey, it's the Edict of Cyrus. Go look it up. So King Darius goes and he looks it up. They start out looking there, in the Babylonian library, in the treasury there. But they end up finding it at the fortress of Ecbatana, which was kind of like Cyrus's summer house, a summer fortress. So they actually look. They look and they find it. And then we reproduced right here something of the Edict of Cyrus. Now, this isn't exactly the same document that we found at the beginning of Ezra in chapter 1. And you may say, gosh, they're not the same. They're not the same at all. Well, no, they're not the same at all. It's most likely that Ezra has included the relevant portions of a document that's much larger. It seems to me that in chapter 1, what we had was the public proclamation, what might be read or announced publicly. But what we have here in chapter 6 is more like the work order. It's more like the financial document that would go behind the edict. It's like the receipts, you know? So in chapter 6, we have very detailed information about the construction itself. And again, more like a work order, more like a financial, document that would support the command to build the temple. At any rate, it's good enough for Darius. He finds a document and then he turns right around and he responds to Tatnai, the governor. Remember? Tatnai is the one who instigated the whole investigation. And now Darius sends his reply to Tatnai, and I think this is kind of hilarious. It's really interesting at any rate, because Darius just says, hey, I found the edict of Cyrus, so back off, Tatnai, back off, stay away. It's amazing. Stay away from the Jews and their building program. Just let them have it. Stay away from them. Let them go. Now, that's just the first thing he says. He goes further than that. The next thing he says is, well, don't just stay away, help them. Help them. And he goes further than that, y'all. It's not just don't get in their way. He goes so far as to say, actually, why don't you help them? And then in the way of help, he says, as a matter of fact, let's just pick up the bill. We're going to pay for it. That's awesome, y'all. This is the first instance in recorded history, in the history of forever, in the history of humanity. This is the first instance. I don't know if there are others, but it's the first instance where a sitting king actually orders sponsors, and also provides for the maintenance of what is essentially a foreign religion in his empire. This is sort of unheard of. And I want you to understand, and this is, part of what Ezra wants you to marvel at, the fact that look what God is doing. This is the equivalent. Y'all remember back a while ago when somebody said, we're going to build a wall and Mexico going to pay for it? Okay, this is just like if somebody had said, yeah, actually, we're going to rebuild the temple and Persia's going to pay for it. And everybody would have hooted and hollered and laughed because that would be ridiculous. We're going to build the temple and Persia's going to pay for it. But that's exactly what happens. King Darius says, hey, stay back. No, as a matter of fact, help them. No, as a matter of fact, why don't you just tell them to save all the receipts and we will pay for it? We're going to pay for it. And then he goes beyond that. We're not just going to pay for the building. Why don't we just go ahead and provide for the worship? Let's help them get worship off the ground. So talk to a preacher down there, find out everything they need for sacrifices, and then you just give them the bulls, the rams, the male lambs, whatever it is they need. You just let me know. I'm going to foot the bill. And then on top of that, if they need wheat and salt and wine and olive oil, like everything they need to make worship happen. I want you to buy their hymnals. I want you to buy their sacrifices. Persia's going to pay for it. At verse 10, I like it. It says, and then when they're worshiping, maybe they can pray for us, pray for the king. I just think it's beautiful. Understand? They're going to build the temple and Persia's going to pay for it. And you're supposed to go, what? That's unheard of in human history. That's unheard of. But I'm telling you, when God is doing what God's going to do, he just loves to do it in a way to make you say, what? He just loves to do it in a way that you would have never seen coming. And you would have never seen this coming, that Darius just said, hey, help them and send me the bill. We're going to pay for it. And so on March the 12th in 515 BC, we know this, March the 12th, 515 BC, the temple was completed. That's 4.5 years after, the prophet Haggai stepped out and said, hey, what is the matter with you people not building the temple? 4.5 years later, they have finished the temple. What follows here in chapter 6 is the very first Passover celebration, the dedication ceremony, which is, you can tell that it's modeled after the dedication of Solomon's temple. This is now what we will call Zerubbabel's temple. It's the dedication of Zerubbabel's temple, but it's not the same kind of dedication. There aren't as many people. And the sacrifices, the feast that follows is not quite as elaborate, but again, it's a smaller group. It's just the remnant. But notice in the Old Testament, this remnant, still God moves forward. It's not the whole, it's not all 12 tribes. You only got representation physically of about 2 tribes, but they sacrificed for all 12. I mean, God is going to take the remnant, the leftover, and he's just going to keep right on unfolding salvation in history, right? I mean, so it's that remnant theology. God takes the remnant and God just moves right on. The joy, the dedication, and now the continuation of worship, the first Passover, the first Feast of Unleavened Bread. It is all happening because the temple is complete exactly as God had intended. Now, quickly, one thing. There's one thing missing, and it's never mentioned again, and I think it's remarkable. Everything is just like it was. You know, the worship continues, but there's no Ark of the Covenant. There's no Ark of the Covenant. It disappeared, y'all. I mean, it was there when Babylon came and destroyed and took them into exile. We got the inventory of every cup out of the kitchen of the temple, but nobody ever mentions the ark. It's the strangest thing. It never gets mentioned again. It's not in this temple. The Ark of the Covenant was the physical symbol of God's presence, and it's gone, and it's not here now. Worship continues. But there's no Ark of the Covenant. Now, I can't explain that. All I know is if the Ark was supposed to symbolize, the Lord of the temple's presence in the temple, well, I'm telling you, the Lord of the temple is Jesus. And when Jesus steps foot in that temple, at the beginning of his ministry in the Gospel of John, the Gospel of Matthew, when Jesus steps in, I'm telling you, the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence. In so many ways, it points forward to the coming of the Messiah, the Messianic messenger that Malachi talks about, who himself is Lord of the temple. He will take up his own residence when Jesus himself comes. He is the Messiah, right? Otherwise, the Ark of the Covenant is gone. Pick up with me right here tomorrow, chapter 7, verses 1 to 28. We really begin a new section of the book of Ezra. And if you notice, in the book of Ezra so far, we hadn't had Ezra, but Ezra himself will step into the story where we pick up tomorrow with chapter 7. So read ahead. Ezra chapter 7, verses 1 to 28. I'm over time today. I will see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock for 10 with Tim. I love you guys. Have a good Monday.